right, y'all. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we are going to be discussing strategic relocation. We brought this topic up many times on the channel. Actually, for several years in a row, we did a video annually on why we moved to Texas, and we would discuss these different topics. Tonight, I have on a fellow Texan once again, Chuck DeLorante. Hey, Chuck, how you doing tonight?
Hey, good evening. Doing great. Doing great.
So Chuck is sporting a very fancy hat there, and
Yes.
we appreciate the support.
And I'm drinking from my Muletown mug, which is in Columbia, Tennessee, in the center of Middle Tennessee, Muletown coffee. But the coffee I'm drinking, none other than native brew from
That's awesome.
Texas Boys. So
thank you.
We brewed some up tonight. It's delicious. We just got it in today.
Great.
So, well, glad to be on board, TD. And this is a very, very good topic. You know, I know you have your story, and you've shared that over the past videos and in your story, and I have mine as well. We originally, this sort of generation of being in Texas, I started in Texas actually in 1981 because of a corporate job move, and I lived in the Fort Worth area. Okay. But I met the Lord there. He met me, rather, and I became a Christian in 1982 after moving to Fort Worth. So came to the Bible Belt, and then wound up going back north for a job. And as we were raising our family, of course, we were avid homeschoolers, as I've shared before. But, you know, as a young man growing up, and, you know, we go back 30 plus years, it's hard to believe the culture is as different as it is, right? Even the last 10 years, things have really changed. So this is a topic that all men, all family men, even if your family is grown, and TD knows my passion is to encourage older men to speak into the younger generation and make that investment and encourage these family guys, whether they're in their 40s or their 30s or they're newlyweds, to get a real grip on the fight that we're in. And it's a battle. It's a spiritual battle. Ultimately, we can say that, but we have to put some legs to our thoughts, right? So
yeah, I mean, me and you, we you know, you're slightly my elder, but we resonate quite a bit. A lot of our values are very much aligned, and it's kind of encouraging to me. It's almost like meeting myself per se in the future, and it's great with somebody that's older than me, seeing the importance of being a man, masculinity, and patriarchy, and patriarchal leadership. That the issue is all of these different topics and subjects overlap. There's an enormous overlap, and that's where the culture, you know, your theology, your doctrine, your biblical understanding of whether it's fatherhood, parenthood, what your responsibilities are as a citizen of, you know, of planet Earth, and then a citizen of heaven as well, and how they all kind of intersect, and how to properly, what does that look like? How do you flesh that out? What does that look like in practice? Our big thing in raising our children, whether it's theology, whether it's discipline, whether it's our homeschooling, is it has to be practical. Like, it cannot be theoretical. Like, we can, there's so much, in my opinion, of Christianity today that's completely, it's what I call compartmentalized Christianity. And they have all of the theology absolutely correct, but they've compartmentalized it into this box where it can kind of sit on a shelf, and that's good for Sunday, or that's good for the Lord's Day, you know. But when it comes to the rest of my life, you know, I got my stuff, I got my hobbies, I got the things that I'm interested in. And, you know, sometimes I might have to sacrifice family time so that I can, you know, hit a ball or drown worms, or, you know, even other good things like hunting and providing. You know, if it's if it's taking place of what you should be doing, it's you're out of balance. And so so much of this, as far as like where your geographical location is, this is what I want to talk about tonight. Is and I think your pastor is writing a book about this subject right now. But the subject I want to talk about tonight is strategic relocation. Do you stay and fight, or running is not always a retreat, so to speak. And that's what I want us to talk about that. And if you want to give us your thoughts on that right now, and then we can kind of expound on it.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and I know you're going to give the title of that book that our pastor Webben is coming out with, but I'll let you introduce that when it's time. So the real question is it better to flee tyranny, or should you stay and fight? And it's not cowardice. It's not being a coward to measure up. I mean, the sons of Issachar come to mind, right? Understand the times.
Yeah.
And is this a time to stay in California? Let's just put it right out there. I mean, are you going to win the battle in California? I mean, if you just look at the voting pattern and you look at, of course, the public policy, the intrusiveness, the taxation, and all that's going on in California, and you say, is this a place where I can even win a local battle?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, other than John MacArthur's church, maybe in a big metropolis where he's got, lots of people, lots of funding, maybe. And I know he stood up against the tyranny, and he did shut down for a while with COVID, and then he stood up against it and somewhat paid a price for a while. But bottom line is, where is the wisdom? Now, MacArthur is 83 years old or 82. He's not going to flee, but maybe those younger family guys, at the end of the day, if they can find a church that's teaching good doctrine and a principle-based group of like-minded people, where in a small community and even into a medium-sized community, could you invest for the long term, not only bring your family up there, but plant yourselves and create a thesis around godly thinking, get involved in the local governance. There's a pastor out of Wisconsin that wrote a couple books on this idea of, the idea of the civil magistrate at the county level. It's a great idea. And
that is, I knew who you're referencing. That
you're talking about the lesser magistrates, Pastor Truella.
Truella. Yep.
Yeah. I've know some of his close friends, but I was reading an article in the Epoch Times by Victor David Hansen. He said, California's lost 700,000 people in the since 2020 to 2022. And there's predictions that over the next 5 years, some major cities are going to fall. Basically, they've already fallen morally. The question is, if you stay, are you really funding an evil empire?
Sure.
And back to these questions, and we're talking about manhood and fatherhood and leading your wife and family. You have to, first of all, this is all about Christ. This isn't a fear-based thinking, right? No. This is a faith-based thinking. So the decision whether to fight where you are or flee to where you can fight again, this is not about giving up. So fleeing, sometimes I believe, can be a very strategic and appropriate response to the things that are around you.
Yeah, and I mean, our position was, being from the Northeast. I actually brought this up on the Curtis Stone interview, and where I had, for 1 year, I had went to school in Tennessee, and after experiencing that culture and just the South, and I mean, I could wax eloquent on the North and the South, and not to the South was right, and it was the War of Northern Aggression, and it was Lincoln's War, and I won't. We don't have to get into all that right now, but there's been a lot of revisionist history. And
Lincoln was great. What are you talking about, Lincoln?
I would challenge everybody to research that on their own.
Pretty much a statist, but go ahead.
Yeah, he was a fascist. But we started praying about it, and we had a 5-year game plan that got expedited to 3 years. And when we analyzed every element of living, right? Cost of living, general culture, political culture, even church culture, like we were talking about this compartmentalization. from our experience, okay, this is our experience. I can't speak for everybody, and I know there'll be plenty of people, oh, you don't know this or that or these people or this organization or whatever. But from our experience, cultural in general is just, for whatever reason, it's just kinder. And then when you pull yourself out into the country, we were looking for a culture, one where if we expected to raise our children, right, to grow up, get married, have children, right? Well, where we were where we were in the Northeast, it was so financially impossible to
Yeah.
to see a financial future for them where they would even be able to purchase like a half of acre.
Right.
So, and then because of the political climate and the restrictive nature of the entire political climate, and what I saw as the death knell in the Northeast was when de Blasio was elected as the mayor of New York City. I was like, the tri-state area is done. And now he's come and gone or whatever, but yeah. I'm still under the opinion that the tri-state area is smoked, and it has readily deteriorated since then. We're 9 years removed now.
Yeah.
And I kept talking about this bulk, and this was way before COVID and all this other crazy tyrannical mayor and governor stuff. But I kept seeing, as I analyzed things, that the country was going to balkanize, that we were going to balkanize. And, unfortunately, in most people's minds, that's red and blue.
Right.
But I mean, Chuck, me and you, we're completely aware of the uniparty and how they both march towards the same end game. One might march faster than the other, but they're both headed the same direction. So that's where our topic, that's why this is so vitally important, because we as fathers and as the patriarchy and as leadership, we need to do what we can do, control what we can control. We need to seek the Lord. We need to listen, and then we need to act accordingly. And we need to do everything that we can do. We can't hope for the next election. We can't vote harder. So, so maybe tell me, speak into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind. Number one, that one has to step back. The progress begins with telling yourself the truth.
That is right. That's 1,000,000%.
And I want to give credit for that quote. And I was looking for it today because I'm using it in a seminar I'm doing Saturday with a group of young men. And but progress, regardless of the source, I think you'd agree, in principle, we can't really make focused progress if we keep lying to ourselves or ignoring the things that are in front of us. So the question I propose to ask rhetorically to you and our readers and myself is, how did we get here?
Yeah.
We got here because big Eva, big evangelical church kept saying, well, no, we don't want to fight. Now's not the time. We got to wait. We got to be nice. And, Jesus wasn't nice in every instance, right? I mean,
what did Vody say? The 11th commandment is "Thou shalt be nice." Right?
Yeah. If you follow Vody Bakum, and I actually was present when Vody spoke at the National Religious Broadcasters Association in Nashville. I lived in Nashville for a while. Great place, by the way. Loved it there. And Tennessee is, on the most part, conservative. They've got some issues, no doubt about it. Be interesting to see what happens to the guys they expelled from the state house the other day, but that's going to be a food fight. But nonetheless, we looked around and we were glad to go to Middle Tennessee, but we came back to Texas. We went there from Texas, but we're back here for, Lord willing, for good. But anyway, Vody spoke there, and he said that, hold on, I forgot my phone was on ring. He said a statement that hushed the room. Now you got to imagine I think it's National Religious Broadcast, so it's NRBL or whatever it is, NRB something, or National Religious Broadcast, NRBA. They're they're fake conservatives
Yes.
somewhat.
Yeah.
Okay, it's any big tent
Like
group
the moral
like that.
majority.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the
Exactly.
moral majority kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And he said that gay is the new black.
Yep.
And
Protected.
this is 2011 maybe, so we're going back 12 or 13 years.
Yeah.
And you could have heard a pin drop in that room. And here's a big black guy talking about, they're using gay to get footing, homosexuality, sodomy, to get footing in the marketplace. And look at what happened in 10 years or 15 years.
Yeah, now look.
And it's mania. So this didn't come on overnight. And so where were we fighting? Where were we thinking? And I think COVID only exacerbated and brought out the problem in bold colors, for the lack of a better description, rainbow colors. And what goes on here is that the local magistrate is not going to stand and defend you, and is not going to stand up for the rule of law in many cases, even in conservative Bible Belt Texas or Tennessee or wherever. So you have to know who's in charge, and you have to be thinking for the long term. And, it could be that we're going to go into a very, very close period of tyranny. I mean, we are in tyranny, and we could be delivered. We don't know. The Lord could deliver us from this. We could see revival. I don't think that's probably likely, but I don't want to discount it. I don't know the will of God in that way. However, we are called, though, to understand the times and to stand and fight and to defend our families, to raise up a godly seed, to be in prayer, to be worshiping together. If you're not in a local church, that I think is sinful. And I don't care how big or how small it is. I think the Lord has shown me over the years, and I've been an elder and a pastor over the years off and on, that really optimal size of a local church is about 150 to 200 people, because beyond that, you have to get these large elder boards. And I'm not saying every big church is wrong, but I think the whole mega church phenomena in the greater evangelical world is kind of rife with mediocrity. And so,
that's being kind, in my opinion.
With that, every man has got a responsibility for his family, but he's also in a community, and we ought to be holding each other accountable. And we can stand for the right things, whether it be pro-life and anti-abortion. Abortion is murder. You ought to be able to say that unabashedly. And if you're weasel wording it, and so I think that's the core of it all. So at the end of the day, back to your thesis, or our discussion rather for tonight, is it better to fight or flee, or should we flee in order to fight? And so that's actually the working title there. I think it's actually coming out May 1st. The book that
I'll put the book on this.
Yeah, Pastor Joel Webben here in Georgetown, Texas, is publishing a book May 1st. Fight by Flight is the exact title. And he's got some good endorsements there. And it's Right Response Ministries. Give him a little plug there. But his position, so his story, he came out of California, and he decided that it wasn't winnable. And you talked about the affordability. You mean you can't live in California on a single income unless you're mega wealthy. And even so, most people in that culture have a spending pattern.
And there was just an article that came out yesterday on Zero Hedge that California utilities are considering charging people by their net worth. So now you're going to pay by the watt, depending on what your net worth is. It's going to change that's it. I mean, it's just pure socialism, anti-capitalism, anti-God, anti-ration, logic, reason. It's completely clown world.
It is clown world. And you ask yourself, is this God's judgment on communities, like LA or wherever? I think so. Of course, I can't be definitively so, but on the other hand of that, if I put together a Christian-based thinking and expand my church into an affiliation of churches, and we band together and we affect, like we went up to an event over Christmas where, there was openly pushing the rainbow agenda, and in the middle of a Christmas celebration, and we stood peacefully, but we were represented there by more than one organization. But we have to get out there and do those things, because the time has really gone past us. Not to say we couldn't have a miracle, but so is more judgment coming? Is more enslavement? Are we going to be like in Babylon? Are we going to be, in exile? Maybe.
Right.
But as you go to the scriptures, I think it's in Jeremiah and other passages
Mhm.
where he talks about I think what is it, Deuteronomy, or is it Jeremiah? Anyway, it talks about prospering where you are, even if
Isaiah.
you're
Yeah.
enslaved, you can
Hmm.
still raise a
Yep.
family, plant a garden.
Yep.
And I'm not about retreat in the sense of going to a mountaintop and hoping that
Right.
the Lord's going to come in the sky tomorrow, but also I'm not a fool. And so we have to be wise. It says in this
Mhm.
article, Victor David Hansen said, when people get angry, they put their kids in Christian school or they homeschool and they move. And
Yep.
so I think we've seen people from California, we've seen people from Canada move here in our area, and we're ministering to them. You talk about a tough place to live. I
Mm.
mean, Canada is not only
Yeah.
economically brutal, but politically, it's beyond brutal. I mean,
Yeah.
they're basically,
Ultra socialist. Yeah.
oh, it is. I mean, that whole thing with the truckers, as we well
Hmm.
know, what happened and how they shut people down and
Yeah.
bankrupt them and jailed them. And, these are not good signs for sure. So, is there something? So, back to these men. So, I'm thinking, okay, I can think of a single provider. I mean, I have son-in-laws that are
I
single providers.
and that's a great point right there as far
Mhm.
as like cost of living, right? If
Right.
I mean, my biblical opinion and position is that a man is to be the provider, the woman is supposed to be the keeper of the home because she has duties that far exceed the man, in my opinion. But the man's designed to go out to battle, to slay the dragon, to bring home the bacon, right? And the woman is not designed to deal with the rainbowed haired transformer decepticon folk and all that stuff, and that's our job.
Yeah.
And we go out to battle, we go out and deal with that stuff. She's at home rearing and raising the children, raising the next generation, raising the backbone, the vitality, the regeneration, so to speak, of culture. That's that woman's position. So if you want to know why culturally we are where we are, is because women have completely and utterly they decided that they needed to go compete with men in a place where they're not designed to be, and they're forsaking the design created order to
Yep.
raise, rear, and train that next generation.
Well, the
And
hand that
it
rocks the cradle, right? I mean,
Yep.
it can't be truer said. And this all, first of all, it all's got to go back to scripture.
Yeah.
Good living comes from reading and practicing what the
Yeah.
Bible tells us. It's that simple. What's difficult is sticking to it. What's
Right.
difficult is, look, even being on this little broadcast here probably could get me some flack. Who knows? I have a
Sure.
number of things in the marketplace, and I really don't care because
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to speak up. I'm not, again, going to be a fool, and I don't want to get angry. I
Mhm.
think there's a righteous anger,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
but we are there's a mudslide of stuff coming, and if you think you can just sit back in your pet little thing and you're going to overcome it, and you have to bring up we've got to bring up our children and grandchildren to function in
Yeah.
a
That's
world. I
right.
mean, we're 20 or whatever years apart, but there's my generation, your generation, and there's the 20 and then another 20 after that, and our
Yeah.
grandchildren. And you say, if this is like this now, how do I equip
Wow.
these young people?
Sure.
How do I get entrepreneurialism? How do I get
Yeah.
thinking on their feet? Because I can tell you, most of my kids would beat their peers that were raised in a public school by miles, and they already have.
Yeah.
They all have skills and ability. And I think I mentioned in our first thing, I'm big on communication. I teach communication. I teach logical thinking. I teach you need to have your elevator speech on all of these topics. And I mean, a little dogmatic. I don't think you can bind somebody's conscience, but I think as a man, it's just good on the basics. You better know how to think about these things in the moment.
Exactly. And I teach my boys, like, you look, if you only know something to the extent that you can teach it to others, or that you can communicate it to others. If you can't communicate it to others,
Right.
you really don't honestly know what you believe.
Yeah.
And in order to be practical and implement it, you have to know it.
Absolutely.
You have to be able to defend your positions.
And I think back again to the core of our topic tonight. that I don't think either of us wants to throw out a huge alarm to, put men in a sort of a flight by fear mode. What we want to
Sure.
say is look around,
Yep.
assess where
Exactly.
you're at. Fortunately, some of the folks that I know that have moved recently to Texas, they capitalized, if you will, by, just by the nature of time and their choices on the real estate market that's now crashing a bit.
Yep.
And they were able to cash out and come here with, more than they thought. So there was some more
Sure.
motivation. But I wouldn't if you got to lose some money to do the right thing, you lose the money to do the right thing. I mean, I've started over. You've started over. I
Yep.
mean, I had a business at one time.
Yeah, I had a very large for me business, and I had a big old expensive house, and I left all my trucks and dump
Yep.
truck and everything, and I left my house, let them foreclose on it, and I said, you know what, we're out of here, and if we
Yep.
got to start over again, and if we got to eat rice and beans for a year, which we did,
Yep.
we ate Home Depot buckets rice and beans for an entire year, and that first year I made $32,000.
Yep.
And we did it. And my wife has a college degree. And before we left, I said, look, you got to look at me. I said, whatever we do, we're going to get to wherever we're at, and we're going to do whatever. You're not going back to work. We're
Right.
not doing that again.
Yep. Yep.
And she made great money, but and that was part of the relocation, right? Being able to afford to live. If you know what, I can't afford to stay home. Well, what if it was as simple as like, well, you're over here, right? Just move. If you could move over here, right? Over here you can't afford to live. If you move over here, you can afford to live on a single income. I mean,
Yep.
how hard is that? Jack Spirko calls it walking to freedom. Look,
Yeah.
we're still in America, right? And you can
Yeah.
freely move about, and we have the ability to move. So
Right.
if it doesn't work where you're at, one option, it's not the only option, but one option is move.
Well, I was listening. Ben Shapiro had a podcast recently, and I was trying to find it, where he mentioned just the numbers that if you felt called to move to one of the swing states like Wisconsin, or I don't know if it's Ohio or Michigan or wherever. We came from Michigan at one point. And I grew up in Ohio. I know those markets and those spaces, and I don't have a big desire at this stage of life to go back
Right.
there.
No.
But if you felt so called, there is some strategy about those states only lost by really relatively small percentage of votes. If we were thinking again about the big tent politics, I'm not so
Mhm.
certain that getting a Republican president is going to bring us to nirvana, but
Correct.
it's got to be better than what we have for
Sure.
sure.
That's the
Um,
hard.
and so I think they said that in a certain way, if you count the votes, Trump only lost by whatever 77,000 or whatever. I
Mhm.
can't remember where I heard that number. So this thing is on the edge. And if we had some strategy about these moves, if you really wanted to strategize politically, I suppose there's some merit in that. Certainly here in Texas, I mean, the big concern, of course, is all of the California money and folks coming here with a
Yeah.
different value structure. I think that can be overplayed a little bit. I know some people, like like I was saying, that have come here that we know personally, that
Sure.
great folks. They're
Yeah.
born again believers, and they got out of there because it really spiritually and
It's a cesspool.
financially they saw it as a cesspool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I think it's a great topic. I think that when I look around and think about the various communities, and sort of back to Pastor Webbin's book there, one of his planks and his thinking is that pick winnable ground. In other words, don't go into Gettysburg and open field combat for a massacre.
Yeah.
Think it through, and think about where you can plant yourself with other people that have skills, talents, and
Yeah.
whether they have some liquidity in their finances, or whether they just have great writing skills or communicating skills, or their pastoral skills or whatever.
And this is speaking
Yeah.
directly to parallel economy, parallel community. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. And it's interesting how we talked about God's judgment. One of my colleagues at work, it was right at the end of the day, as I was getting to leave, I was walking out the door to leave the office, and he said to me, and me and him probably have different ideas on theology as far as eschatology and different things. And he said, do you ever think that there will be a time that you'll have to flee America. And I'm not saying that that's not
Yeah.
a possibility, but I said it's funny that you mentioned that, because I've been studying Revelation again, and this topic's been coming up a lot in different podcasts and discussions and everything. And I said, I don't believe so. I said, I believe the move where you should flee from are the flashpoints, are the Babylonian,
Yeah.
densely populated, very incredibly blue, which, hey, it's not about left and right. It's about right and wrong. And it's
Right.
about, biblical principles. But if you get out of the flashpoints, God's judgment is absolutely coming there in a very concentrated way. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that he's going to exclude the country folk, right? But I felt the need to, when we felt the need to move, that the Lord was saying, look, you all need to move, and things were very different 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and I actually started praying and considering it about 13 years ago. And what's really interesting, it was over something, we had like a straight line wind event, and we lived in a pretty densely populated area, but we were still on 5 acres. You couldn't see a neighbor to the left, to the right of us. And it was a large wind event. It knocked a lot of the power out. And it was a Saturday, and I was working. I took my crew to a job, and my foreman, who's like, we'll probably have another podcast about the employee crisis, but he was one of those employees that would drive to work in his van with no gas in it. And he said, hey, man, here's this 5-gallon tank. Can you go get me some gas? Well, I said, okay. So I started driving up the interstate, and it was a concrete median, and I'm driving and the power's out. So that means that all the gas stations don't have power. So I'm driving. I drove, densely populated. I probably passed 10 gas stations. I only drove about maybe 5 miles. And the very first gas station that had power, I mean, it was like 1970s gas lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, but more than that, people were out of their mind,
Oh,
cursing and all this stuff. So we sneak in there. We waited a very long time. We sneak in there. We fill up our 5-gallon tank. Well, it was a concrete median. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have to keep going north until I can turn around. So I pull out. I go north. Well, the next gas station had power, and there wasn't but regular 3 cars there or whatever. And I was like, wow, this is nuts. This minor event has people in such, and it was insane. It was such an insane frenzy. And I came home that day, and I said, you know what, babe, I really think we should start thinking about moving, because that event created so much turmoil, and it lasted 7 days, and you would have thought that it was like nuclear fallout.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really what got us thinking about this whole thing. And that was the event that I can recall, that was actually when we really started thinking about this. And then it was just 3.5 years from then that we made the move, and we just dropped everything and moved.
Well, I think you bring up a lot of great points there. When, people get hungry, people get thirsty, and people get fearful, those are powerful forces. And, Christians need to, when you say trust the Lord with all your heart, you find out what you're made of when you're in crisis, whether that be any kind of conflict, let alone one where you're fearing for food or whatever. And I mean, those things could all happen. And I'm not saying, no one can really, we talked a little bit about this a week ago. You and I didn't, but in another venue, about, okay, it's not bad to plant a garden. It's not bad to raise some crops. I mean, I've got 30, 40 cattle out here. I can't eat them all, but eventually, I suppose if all Armageddon broke loose, eventually we'd eat them all, to survive. But people would come over and they'd want some of it. And, at what point do you have benevolence versus somebody attacking you? I don't know. All those things can happen. People, like you say, you were in a temporary mode in 7 days. I went through a power outage years ago in Michigan for 5 days. Yeah. And unfortunately, I had a backup generator and lots of fuel. And, I prepared for those things So we mentioned on other podcasts or YouTube, I've got an off-grid place here that I just finished. So we got some ability
Sure.
to have a little refuge, but you can't prepare. I mean, it's like Y2K. I mean,
Yeah.
I can remember all the prep for that. We did our share, but at the end of the day, it gets a little silly. But that's where you got to walk in faith. And, you know, if you go down and somehow somebody attacks you or whatever, you do what you can do.
Sure.
You don't want to be foolish. You don't want to be acting out of fear and anger and retribution. But we don't know. People are, you know, under the right conditions, people do weird things for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that, again, backing up the bus, saying, okay, all the guys out there, wherever they might be, guys and gals. I mean, I'm thinking of the, you know, Northeast Michigan. You know, I'm a Northerner, you know, by birth and living for quite a bit of my life. I get it. The Bible Belt isn't, you know, these there's sinners down here. We're all sinners, right?
No panacea, right?
Yes, no panacea. But just from a climate standpoint, just from a living standard, just from a cost of living, I mean, even Alabama, I've known some friends that are trying to move to Alabama. It's still fairly affordable there. Middle Tennessee is great.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of great locations.
And what we were discussing with Curtis Stone is I believe that there's actually even going to be a little bit of a reprieve where the market is still hard enough that if you wanted to sell, you could sell. And then, you know, as this market continues to soften, there's going to be tremendous buying opportunities. So we're still, you know, we're still seeing this really slow deflation from all this QE and fake paper and stuff. And that's the grace of God.
You're not
absolutely
kidding.
I mean, you just we can't even crunch these numbers. So it's completely the grace and mercy of God. And he, in my opinion, analyzing that he's saying, hey, I'm going to give you a little bit more time, you know, and that doesn't mean if you move and you buy the perfect space and it's got all the perfect stuff, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to go right, because that never happens.
Right.
But I do see it as an excellent time of opportunity to take action.
Yeah, one of the guys from church Sunday that moved here from Michigan, we helped them kind of land on their feet here and able to store some of their things at our place. But they rented a house so they can get their bearings. But he hit the market.
That's how you do it. Yeah,
pretty good getting out of Michigan, and he picked up a job, and he's only been on that job less than 3 months, I think, or about 3 months. And he said he's making more money and more opportunity, and he's on an incentive plan. He's doing great. He loves it. In 3 months here in Texas, he said he made more money now. He's making more money than he ever made in Michigan.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think there are, you know, I don't want to be totally pro Texas, but I think it's a great place. There are other great places too.
Yep, there are. And what I'll do too is I'll plug Curtis's course again. I think this early bird special is still good till sometime tomorrow. I'll put the link in the show notes down below of Curtis's How to Buy a Property, and he gives you 98 illustrations, and he goes through all the different ways that he filters them. It is so excellent, especially if you're buying property to homestead, to garden, to cat, to raise animals. It's worth every penny. It is incredible. That's why I tracked him down to try to get him on, and he was so gracious. Like immediately he was like, yeah, I'll go on to, you know, the next night. So it was really cool like that. But it is an excellent course, worth every penny. And so I'll link that down below, because if anybody is considering relocating, it's an excellent way to start to filter that process. Because, right, Chuck, it's like, well, there are lots of good places to move, you know, so how do you start filtering that? And obviously a great church with great people, great leadership, that's definitely a major, one of the major filters to be in search of.
Well, it is, and it's very important. Our church is very welcoming, because it's made up of a lot of people that came here from the original group out of California. They have a heart for welcoming new people, and you can tell. And it's, you know, we're a little bit on the older side of the congregation, which is good. It's a good mix. but I can see the camaraderie and the strength in numbers. And I think most of the men seem to be fairly realistic. They don't expect a free lunch, but it's a whole lot better to come somewhere where you can go visit with a family, have some meal together, break bread together, and feel like you're encouraging one another, even if the road's a little hard and different.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go somewhere as a solo act, that's pretty hard.
Yeah.
That's pretty hard to establish a community out of thin air.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
And I can test that. It's tough sledding.
Yep, it is. Yeah. It is. Yeah, most of us Yankees know what that term means for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I think that these are interesting times. Thanks for plugging the book there a little bit. And I got to get that title right. Is
here, I'll put it back on the screen. It says fight. Wait a second. Fight by Flight.
I love it. Fight by Flight. That's a great title. And it's coming out May 1st. I think you can get the book through Right Response Ministries. You'll find them on YouTube. Yeah.
Yep.
I asked Pastor Webben where he's going to sell it, but I think he's going to sell it on his own website there.
Okay.
Great broadcast. Well, great. I'm glad I moved back to Texas when I did. I mean,
I'm glad you moved back to Texas, Chuck. Texas needs Chucks.
Yeah, I love it. And we've been in and out over the years. We came here first in the 80s, and then I went a long time away, raised most of my kids in Michigan. I was involved in the automotive industry up there in Detroit area. And then we finally decided to make the plunge and come back in 07. So other than a trip up to Nashville for a while, we've been back here in Texas and returned again in 16, and we're staying the course. So, and I'm glad I bought my land where I'm at now 4 years ago, because now I couldn't.
You struck gold. And I retrospectively, and like I said, we used to do this annual video every year, why we chose Texas, would we change our mind?
Right.
And no one can predict the future. You look at what you're presented with, you look at what the scriptures say, you look at the current environment and the current facts, right? And it's just like, I wonder if I need to lose weight. Well, measure your waistline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, oh, well, the tape says 43, but I wear a 38.
Yeah, right.
Right. And you have to suck it in and do all this stuff. But the only way that, you're going to work out of the clogged artery deal and all that stuff is like, no, it's a 42,
Yep.
It's a 42. And if you want to get it down to a 38, that requires facing the fact that it's a 42.
You gotta do the work.
I really appreciate this conversation. I think this has been good. I hope it's a blessing to folks. I'm going to put Curtis's link down below. When the book comes out, keep an eye out for this book. It looks like it's going to be a good one. What I'll do too is I'll put the link to your pastor's website down there too. So great. I don't know if he has like an early mailing list thing that they can sign up for or whatever. But
he might. Yeah.
The link will be there. So at least when the book is ready for publication. So is he self-publishing the book?
I think through his ministry. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Yeah. I might say too, and we've got a couple other podcasts videos we're going to do, but back to this thing about, multiple streams of income and men. And I would encourage you again, my story is I was very, very conscious in my 40s, raising a large family, that I'd better figure out how to stand on my own 2 feet and get a skill that I could sell.
Right. Yeah.
And I did that. And by God's grace and providential actions by the Lord, opened doors I never expected to have open, but it started with preparation.
Yep. And I can say the exact same thing. Opportunity success is when opportunity and preparation meet. And you have to prepare so that when the opportunity presents itself, you can seize the opportunity. And that's, we're going to be talking in the future about financial vehicles and different things. And that's the purpose of having those financial vehicles, right? And when you have that financial vehicle, all of a sudden opportunity, and we're not talking, listen, y'all, we're not talking about The Secret. Okay.
Right.
We're not talking about The Secret. We're talking about just basic observable facts that when you have ability, because, you know, it's the parable of the talent, right?
Yep.
It's the parable of the talent. And when you have the ability and you hear somebody say, oh, I wish I, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Hey, I could probably help you finance that.
Right.
Or as a matter of fact, I'm looking for something to invest in or whatever, you know, but when you have the ability, opportunities present themselves, but you can have all the opportunities in the world. And if you're not prepared, you might as well not have any opportunities.
Right.
You might as well be in communist China.
That's right. Another adage I would throw in there is success leaves clues.
Yeah.
Success leaves clues. You want to look at the clues for what you need to do. Look at people who have been successful. And I don't mean mega wealthy. I mean, first of all, success in life, you know, success in their spiritual life. You know, you don't get there by not reading your Bible and by not praying and by not checking your own character, having accountability. That starts with that. The rest of these things in skill development certainly is a biblical thing. We're called to do that. But success leaves clues.
Yeah,
and,
none of those things are like these deep, dark secrets that nobody
Right.
knows, right? These are all basic tenets of life that are very well known. And, you know, there's it's one thing to know it, but the practical thing is to do it.
Amen.
All right, Chuck. Well, thank you so much for being on. I hope this is a blessing to y'all. And if you do, this is a value for value proposition. So if you do appreciate what we do here on the channel, be like Chuck and go over to the TexasBoys.com. Maybe
Absolutely.
you can buy some coffee over there or a cool hat, some merch or what have you. But yeah, we really appreciate all of our subscribers and our customers. And it's a big blessing to us. It's a blessing to our family. We're trying to live this thing out. What we're trying to do is illustrate it for everyone. Is, I always say, proof's in the pudding, right? And I want people that follow this channel that's been going for 6 years now. I want them, you know, it is true, unfortunately, and it's sad. There are haters, right? And they're just waiting to see, oh, you wait. You know, these people are so confident in God and in their faith and in foundationally raising your children. And, you know, they look at it almost as bragging. I mean, we give God all the honor and the glory. I'm not bragging, but we decided, right? We made the decision, single family income, stay at home mother to school train, raise and rear the children. Right. And we continue to do that. The Lord continues to bless us. And if he stops blessing us, we're going to keep doing it by the grace of God. And that's, we want to show the pudding.
Yep. Amen.
So that's what we're doing. And it's been great it's always great having you on, Chuck. Looking forward to our next broadcast. And any closing thoughts?
Well, just a little tip of a story yet in the making. So you mentioned it right before we're wrapping up here. So I have a daughter that's hardworking, and she has a little business. And just as you said, you never know how Providence is going to be and the door is going to open. Someone approached her today that's giving her like a mega opportunity. She, you know, and again, it's entrepreneurial. It's Proverbs 31 in its nature, if you will, for her. So we're praying about that, and I gave her some initial thoughts, and we're to meet with this person again. But it's somebody who saw her hard work, who saw her diligence and enthusiasm. And believe me, you're not going to sell anything if you don't have enthusiasm.
That's
and I
right.
don't mean fake enthusiasm, but principled, just right there in a moment. People can read a fake in 5 minutes. Most people can. And they read it in your words and your actions. And so I think her virtues and her hard work are coming home to roost. So I'm really encouraged.
Great.
And you kind of mentioned something about that. I can't remember exactly what you said, but so it really rung a bell with me. So, but that'll be a story for another day.
I hope we get the update soon on that one. So that sounds awesome.
It's amazing. It was so amazing. And this person called her, and I actually was looking at another property, and the agent knew this person, and my daughter's phone rang. The guy had asked me for my daughter's number, and I thought he wanted to make an order. And so I said, well, if you want to order something, just here's her number. Well, he was actually getting her number for this other person to contact my daughter. And
that's cool.
My daughter coming home this morning, and she said, Dad, you're not going to believe what happened. She was like, I don't even know what to do with this.
Great.
So
That's
it's
great.
like awesome. Great. Praise the Lord.
All right.
So
Amen.
give him the glory and walk in faith and diligence. And you know what? The joy of the Lord is your strength.
Amen.
Nehemiah 8.
All right, brother.
8:10. All right. That's my parting thoughts.
You have a great night.
All right,
Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.
Bye.